The Gospel of Gold by G.S. Lewis. At that moment, Machamp lumbered through the doorless threshold, stomping heedlessly through the scattered, broken glass. Gold's vision had only taken a moment of time in reality, but it was all the brute had needed to catch up. The hunter now beheld its quarry, the boy Bruno wanted so much, and beside him, the world's weakest Dragonite, back on its feet. Confusion crossed Machamp's mind, but it did not pause to think. There was still work left to do after all, and failure was not an option. Ignoring its many compounded injuries, Machamp crouched to charge. "Take it away," said Gold, drifting back and making space. Dragonite fired a beam of energy from its mouth at Machamp. This was the least that could be said about it, for the Hyper Beam was Lance's signature move, and the infamy of its raw power had made his name feared and revered region-wide. The room was charged with light and heat, but also something more. Gold could not specify it, but it seemed to him like Dragonite's very substance and soul energy was being funneled into the light pillar. Such a reckless ejaculation of force might slash years from the lifespan of a lesser creature that attempted it, but Dragonite was made of sterner stuff and only doubled down. The beam's intensity was so great that Gold flung himself against the far wall, fiercely compelled by his instincts to avoid its overwhelming power at all costs. There was no question that he would die if the light engulfed him. Moreover, there would be less of his body remaining afterward than if he had been hit by the goldenrod magnet train at full speed. When the beam dimmed at last, and the heat diminished to a tolerable level, Gold remained plastered to the wall for a little more time while his eyesight returned. He could hear Dragonite heaving great gulps of air, its breathing like the bellows in a blacksmith's forge. Gradually, he could see that the floor in front of the dragon was a bright, smooth line of reflective glass, leading straight to the newly enlarged doorway. Machamp was nowhere to be seen. All that remained was the outline of its feet, where it had stood when the Hyper Beam consumed it. Why didn't Dragonite do that from the beginning? Wondered Gold. Could it have? Or could this have only worked after everything else happened first? Another thought came now, a realization that obliterated his euphoria, leaving a cold void in its wake. Bruno's star Pokémon was dead, and there would be no bringing it back. From the beginning, Gold had sensed that a death was inevitable, but he had clung to some hope that all parties involved might yet walk away with their lives, or at the least, his side would not be responsible for the very thing he had fought to prevent. His insides felt hollow as the victory he and Dragonite had achieved together. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Until now, the weight of remorse came upon him like heavy garments soaked in icy rain. Gold slid to the ground, not registering that his legs had given out under him, nor caring that the floor was still hot. In a way, this was worse than Cyndaquil's death. This time, regardless of his intentions, he was complicit in a horrible deed. Only a fool would raise a Dragonite without contemplating the casualties. Surely, there could have been a better outcome than this. It had just happened so fast. "Don't go in there yet. Your shoes will melt right off." "I don't care. There's no time. Gold!" The sound of Jinichi and Marina's voices brought Gold's attention back, enough for him to raise his head dully, and guessed that they must have seen the bright orange dragon within, whose beam had shaken the neighborhood. However, Dragonite only gave them a curious look, its expression now calm and passive. Gold wondered idly if this gentle giant demeanor was its usual way, or if it merely wished not to startle the newcomers. In any case, it was not an aggressor. After a couple seconds, Marina worked up the courage to step into the ruined Pokemon Center, hauling a large blue body in her arms. Gold heard her pant with exertion as she walked, and he saw her head swivel about in search until she caught sight of him. As she turned fully his way, Gold saw that Crocona's limp body was in her arms.
"There you are! Why didn't you answer me?"
Marina knelt where he sat, placing her water type gingerly down on its back. The Pokemon's entire left side was a much darker shade of blue than the other, and parts of him seemed to be caved in, while others swelled with deep bruising. Crocona uttered a faint groan. "He's not dead," murmured Gold, dimly stating the obvious. "He's not," Marina agreed. "Thanks to Meganium's last-second reflect technique. Still, that Onix hit him like a train. Please, I don't know how badly his insides got hurt. You have to heal him quickly." Gold looked down at his hands, and a fresh wave of remorse rushed through him. He looked past Marina, past Crocona, at the outline of the feet in the floor where Machamp once stood. "I'm not worthy," he said thickly, through a lump in his throat. "Have someone else do it." Marina stared at him with more incredulity than he had ever remembered seeing from her, and she had seen him perform multiple miracles.
"Someone else?" she demanded. "What are you talking about? Who else? Look at this place!"
She gestured with her arm at their surroundings, an empty and heavily damaged Pokemon Center.
"There's nobody to do it but you! Meganium needs healing as well, so what are you stalling for?"
I'm afraid." Gold attempted to swallow the lump, but it didn't go away. "That's the problem. I'm never afraid when the spirit is on me, and I can't heal except by the spirit." Marina's face softened to an expression of pity, but she did not relent.
"What are you so afraid of?"
"Touching him," said Gold, looking at Crocona where it lay prone. "After touching Dragonite brought him back and caused Machamp's death." Tears blurred his vision, and he wiped them roughly away.
"Do you understand?"
he asked sharply, with sudden force.
"I screwed up! I helped get a Pokemon killed! And now I don't know what I'm striving for! I'm afraid to touch your Pokemon and see nothing happen. But I'm even more afraid that he will be healed, only to die soon after. I've already seen it in Violet City!"
He pulled his knees to his chest and turned his back in shame. Behind him, he heard Marina's voice, now pleading to him, and he fought to shut her out.
"Don't say that, Gold! Would you just look at him? Crocona's in pain, and he defended you back there! Doesn't that count for anything?"
"Gold," came Jinichi's voice, joining the dialogue. He sounded unusually composed. "This power of the spirit you have, do you remember what you told me about it back in Goldenrod?" Gold made a feeble attempt to recall, but nothing came to mind. He shook his head. "You said you were like a Pokeball that contained it," Jinichi clarified. "But the power belonged to the Pokemon within. So by that spirit, you revived this Dragonite? Gold looked up to see Jinichi pointing tentatively at the dragon Pokemon. He could tell that Jinichi was itching to ask him other questions, such as how a Dragonite fit into the whole story, but was restraining himself. Yes, said Gold, not really getting where he was going with this. Jinichi gave him a pointed look. Then stop blaming yourself, or at least stop doubting the spirit. I thought you guys got along. Spirit knows her business. Whatever. If you don't understand it, meditate on it later or something. But right now, it's your job to lay hands on those who are begging you for help, isn't it? Well, isn't it? The wisdom in Jinichi's words moved Gold, so that he stared at him in amazement. For the entire time he'd known him, which was admittedly not that long, Jinichi had always seemed driven by ambition or panic. Tranquility and rationality were not in his nature. Yet here he was now, the voice of reason in the room. It seemed completely out of place. Unless, thought Gold, his eyes widening, the spirit is on him. I was wrong to doubt, he whispered under his breath, so softly that his lips barely moved. But I'm better now. I'll do whatever you tell me. He wasn't sure that Marina or Jinichi heard him, but it didn't matter. The words weren't meant for them. Turning to face Marina's Croconaw, he put out his hands and placed them on the creature's temples. Rise, he commanded in a clear voice, and breathe freely. All eyes were trained unblinkingly upon Croconaw's body, but the transformation was so fast, so instantaneous, that they missed it. One moment in time, the Pokemon lay with grievous wounds, and the next, not a scratch was to be seen, not a scale was out of place. It was like Croconaw had never been hurt at all. Marina's face brightened with joy as her partner stood upright and favored them all with a goofy grin. Gold smiled and felt the burden on his shoulders lighten considerably. Let's make Meganium feel better, he announced, climbing to his feet. Hey, Dragonite! Gold paused and stared at the spot where Dragonite should have been. For a creature so bulky and bright orange, it had been remarkably competent about stealing away unnoticed. Gold looked one more time, then shrugged and headed out the entrance with his companions. There was still work to do.